Awesome. And we will let people trickle in here for a couple of minutes, and we will begin at 5:05. Awesome. As people trickle into the live stream, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. And we're excited to hear from Coach Aldrich today and hear his thoughts and answer some of your questions. We're going to let people trickle in for a few more minutes, and then we will get going. 5:05. We will start kind of letting Coach get rolling. We got a few, we'll call them distinguished guests here on the live stream that hopefully is some of our future presenters and some people that are helping us out get things rolling. Awesome. We will see. We'll see. It looks like it's working at the moment, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed. Awesome. And thanks, Rob, for all the work you've done putting this out there on the Twitter and the Instagram. That's huge. Seems like we've got a pretty good contingent of people that are interested in this, which is hopefully we can keep growing that. Hello, Coach Lane. We're just waiting a minute or two for people to trickle in on the live stream. I think we had advertised a 5:05 start, and then we'll get rolling in a couple minutes here. Is everybody hanging in there with the not going crazy in your houses? Oh, shoot. All right, got perfect. So everybody staying sane? Somewhat? That's good. Well, relative term.
Yeah, ain't no one here, so we're good.
That's a good thing. That's a really good thing.
Yeah. Wyomingites don't like to be told what to do either.
Oh, really?
Do what they want.
All right. Coach Aldrich, could you say something? I'm just trying to test the audio with some of the people on YouTube Live.
Sure. Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing?
There we go. We're good.
Good.
Yeah, I think my headphones were mucking things up, but we were getting pretty close to 5:05 here, so we will get rolling. First, I'll say thank you to all these coaches here who are helping us out with this, and Coach Aldrich for being willing to present tonight as our first presenter. And, thank you to the National Throws Coach Association and MF for helping us kind of broadcast this and get as many people involved as possible and hopefully share these conversations with as many people as we can. Anybody who's watching and listening, feel free to share this, with anybody who thinks interested. Kind of our goal is to just, if anybody else here is like I am, or missing track and missing some of those interactions we're getting at meets and with our colleagues and athletes. So hopefully this is an outlet for us to kind of learn a little bit and get a little bit better and come out on the other side of this a little bit smarter and well prepared for seasons to come. So I'll intro Coach Aldrich real quick and then turn it over to him. But Coach Aldrich is the head coach at Carnegie Mellon University. He is also going to serve as the 2020, or I guess now 2021 men's Olympic throws coach. And he's served on kind of a laundry list of other national team coaching staffs, including world championships in 2016, 2017. He has coached at the Pan Am Games and a couple of NAC, AC championships, and has served as a Coaches Academy instructor for the Brazilian Olympic Committee. So pretty distinguished record, coaching at a wide array of levels, and we're excited to hear what he has to share with us today. And with that, I'll let you share your screen, Coach, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, everybody, and Brandon, especially for inviting me to actually speak. I really appreciate it. Just kind of go through a few things. One of the things that I do every single year, not only as a throws coach, but I'm also the head track and field coach for Carnegie Mellon, is I pick a saying for this year that we kind of, build our season around. In past years, you can see we've had together, passion, grit, drive, commit. This year, our saying was care. And I picked it up from Devin Crosby, who's the athletic director at Lynn University. Coach Curcio will remember Devin because he was one of our former athletes at Slippery Rock University. And so Devin talks about his care principle as connecting, adopting, rest, and excellence. And so it kind of really fit into what we do as a program at Carnegie Mellon. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to Devin, who has done pretty well for himself coming from Slippery Rock. And Coach Curcio and myself were his coaches at Slippery Rock. So just a little bit, as Brandon said, I've really had a very wide background on things. I've coached at the high school level. I've coached at Division II. I've coached at Division III. Been assistant coach, been head coach. And obviously I've been fortunate enough to be a coach for the United States on 7 international teams now. And what it all has done is it has basically brought me to who I am today. And so as I was putting this together, I think it's important that you always understand where people come from, so that you can have an idea where their philosophy is and why they do certain things. I'm from Massachusetts. Rob Lasaucer and myself competed against each other, even though we didn't know each other. But I was smarter. I went to Slippery Rock University instead of Springfield to be a phys ed major. I figured I'd get out of the state and go see what something else was like besides Springfield. And it really helped mold who I was. I didn't do track except my senior year in high school. And that's a long story on how it happened. Basically, I played football, ice hockey, and baseball. But back in the 70s, it was taboo to lift for baseball players. And so my AP biology teacher was the head baseball coach. And he called me up one day during class and like, are you going to be lifting? I was like, yeah, I'm getting more looks for football. He said, well, you can't play baseball. Well, the best runner in the school was also in the class, and they said, well, why don't you come out and throw? And next thing you know, I did. And so that's how it all started. So I didn't start this whole track thing until later on. But then when I got to Slippery Rock, just did football my freshman year, and then didn't go out and do track until my sophomore year. But after that first year, I started to realize that I was much better at track than I was in football. So I put all my efforts into being the best track athlete. But I also knew that I was going to be a coach. I've always known that I wanted to coach since a real young age. And Coach Maxwell, who was the fourth best hurdler in the world in 1948. And I say he was the fourth best hurdler because he didn't make the Olympic team, because the top three hurdlers in the world were his teammates on the World Record Shuttle Hurdle team. And so Coach Maxwell used to hang up all the workouts for the hurdlers, sprinters, and jumpers underneath the stairwell. And so by the time I was a junior, I knew I was going to be coaching. I used to take all his workouts. And every week I'd take all his workouts, and I still have them to this day. And I've gone back and I referred to them. And so I knew right away that I wanted to coach, and it just ended up starting out as a football coach, and it's gravitated to the track. And I've been so fortunate. And I think later on we'll get into more and more about my mentors and friends, and we can really see how that helped shape things for me. I think one of the big things that we need to do as coaches, especially in this day and age, is we've got to really get our kids much more into the history of the sport. And especially if we're talking about throwers, the history of the events that they're doing. And so this is just a quick picture of some Discus Legends, John Powell, Jay Sylvester, Mac Wilkins, that they were all there a number of years ago when we had the National Throws Coaches Association symposium clinic convention, if you will, out in Columbus, Ohio. And the one year, these three legendary discus throwers were there. So I was fortunate enough to get a picture of all three of them. And Rob was the big person who put them on. So especially in this day and age, it's so easy for our kids to learn about the history, but sometimes they just need to be prompted to go and do that. But it's also to look towards the future. And this is from this summer at the NACAC under 23 championships. And on the picture on the left there, that's myself with TJ Crater and with Jordan and Sam, two of the best young throwers that we have, especially in the shot put. And then the picture on the right is at the end, all the throwers, we got together for a picture at the end. So I think it's important that we also look to the future on what we're going to be doing as well. And I also believe that it's important, and why this is from 2017, and this is myself and Mason. And I love standing next to Mason because he makes me feel like I'm a distance runner. And this is Kadivus Robinson, one of the best 800-meter runners ever in the history of our country. And again, it's not just knowing the history of the events that we do, but also knowing something about an 800-meter runner like Kadivus and that as well. So just a couple of things that we can go into before we just get some possible questions. All the things that I've learned over my career, both as a thrower and as a coach, is all great. It's all information that I have to my disposal, but I have to use my ability to shape what I know into how it will work for me and the athletes that I'm actually coaching. And I think one of the greatest things that occurred for me by going to school at Slippery Rock was my throws coach, Thomas Lambert. he taught us not just to be throwers, but in actuality, he was teaching us how to be coaches. And I'm sure a lot of people out on the web have heard of Michael Hambrick. He does an awful lot of things in social media as well. And he was a teammate of mine, and he was the one who actually really started showing me how to throw the discus. And so many of us as throwers, that is what we are now. We're coaches. Jane Beatty, who is one of the first ever females to use rotational movement in the shot put, as a Western PA girl, and she threw 48 feet back in 1983. And again, she was one of the first ever females to throw with rotational movement instead of gliding. And Jane, for years, has been a coach at local high schools here in Western PA. And so here are just some of the limitations that we have at Carnegie Mellon. You know, the amount of time that I'm able to work with people, the weight room, our facilities that we have, multi-sport athletes, the academic and athletic ability. And the perfect example is, and I'll show this, Len Hwang. He is the best discus thrower that has ever come to Carnegie Mellon ever in the history of the school. And as a senior in high school, he was third in the emerging elite at New Balance, and he threw 171 3 inches. That year, 2 years ago, he was the number 234th ranked discus thrower in the nation. Whereas if we go back to that picture of TJ with Jordan Geist, Jordan is probably the third best shot putter ever in the history of the sport for the United States and even in the world. And so knowing the athletic ability is really important. What I can do and what I want them to do, it may take them 4 years to finally be able to do that. And so that's kind of where we do things. But Len will be he's the computer science major. So his probably first job out of college, he'll make it over $100,000. So a lot more than what I'll be making. So with that, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and open it up to some questions, and then we can lead into some of the other things that we'll talk about.
Totally. I thank you, Coach, for that start, and we'll kind of get right back into it with some of these background questions. You had mentioned how important it is to kind of draw from other people and have people that you can associate and help you in the sport. Who are some of your major mentors throughout your career?
Well, obviously, initially it was my college coaches, Bill Lennox, Dick Maxwell, and Tom Lambert. Coach Lennox was the head coach. But even in high school, one of the first person to ever teach me how to throw, he was an art teacher at Somerset High School, Jim White. And then we get out of college. I became very good friends with Steve Gardner, who is one of the best high school coaches in Massachusetts history. And he's now he just retired from being the head track coach at UMass Dartmouth. And I learned a lot from him. And the thing about it, Brandon, is for me, I'm not specifically just a throws coach. My history and background in coaching has been so very broad. I mean, my first job out of college was at Bishop Stang High School in North Dartmouth, Massachusetts. It was me. I was the only coach, and we had 70 kids on the team. And I was the only one there. So I had to coach the distance runners, jumpers, everybody. And I think that was very good for me as things went on, because even Michelle will tell you, for many years at Slippery Rock, I was never the throws coach at Slippery Rock. I was a long triple jump, sprints and hurdles and multi-event coach at Slippery Rock. But the thing that those things did was it gave me a different appreciation on what I can also bring to the throws and how I can relate the throws to some of those other events as well. So I think those were my mentors. But then my first real college job was at Allegheny College. Ralph White hired me for my first college job, and he taught me again so very much, not specifically about throws, but just about coaching at the collegiate level. But then you go from there, and I've been so fortunate to have friends, and a lot of them are here on with Rob and Derek and Michelle, Carrie, Judd Logan, and the list goes on. Mike Sargent at South Carolina, Pat Ebel, really got to know him when he was coaching at Oshkosh, another Division III school. And you just take from everything that people have, and you're just fortunate to be able to reach out. I've been able to reach out to people like John Smith and be able to bounce some things off of him. And so I think for young coaches out there, the more people that you can get to know and don't be afraid to ask questions of, the better you're going to be. And it just is a great way to have conversations about what things are like. And it doesn't matter if you're at a Division III or the Division I school, people are going to talk, and that's where one of the best things for me coaching at that international level has been. I got to basically spend 3 weeks with Art Venegas and listening to him, how he was coaching Joe Kovacs and Darrell Hill. And it was an amazing thing because it was the first time I ever got down to really sit and know him, but then I was able to see how Mitch Krauser worked with Ryan. And that was interesting because obviously I went up and asked Mitch, I was like, hey, how are things working as a coach for your son? And that's a whole different dynamic than other things, and I've had a little bit of that because my son, he's currently a senior in college, but growing up, he was a baseball player, and I worked with him through baseball all the way growing up. So it was neat hearing about that dynamic of being a father and working with an athlete as well. So the more people you can reach out and become friends with, and I think that's one of the great things about our sport is that people are not afraid to share with you. It's sometimes in football or basketball, they may not want to share because they think that you're going to beat you. I would love to sit down and talk with Al to see how he's been able to develop year after year after year kids from Bates, a small little liberal arts school up in Maine. Brandon understands because where Brandon went. But how many athletes has he had at that national level? And I know they're not showing up in Al's backyard as the best throwers ever in the history. But he's doing something right with his progressions and his teaching that there's got to be something there that we can all learn from to help make our kids better. So I think that's a great thing.
Awesome. And you kind of, a question we had submitted, it kind of goes to what you were talking about, coaching all sorts of events and drawing from all that. One of the questions is that we know that you've always coached a lot more events than the throws. This is a position that many coaches, especially high school coaches, find themselves in. How do you manage your time working with so many athletes?
Yeah, well, number one, I was a bachelor. So I didn't have anybody. I was living at home with my mom and dad. And I was at a Catholic high school where I could actually have kids stop practicing at 2:30 and then another group come at 4:30 and then another group even be there at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and their parents would come and pick them up. In a lot of public school situations, you might not have that situation. But luckily for me, as the only coach at Bishop Sang High School, I was able to spread them out so I could work with event versus event group. The other thing was get to know your facilities people, because the night workman at Bishop Sang High School, his real job during the day was a carpenter. And I can't tell you how many boards he fixed in the gym after some of our guys threw the shot put and lost it and broke a couple of boards on the basketball floor. So get to know your facilities guys and treat them right at Christmas time and everything else, and they will save your job for you and that. So it's just, again, in your situation, trying to find the time. But I had nothing else that I wanted to do but coach. I wanted to try to make us the best. But again, it's always been my mantra that I could be known as the next Art Venegas, one of the best coaches in the world. But unless the kids trust and believe in what I'm saying and asking them to do, it doesn't matter. You've got to make sure that you develop a relationship with all of your kids, no matter what events they are, so that they trust and believe in what you're doing. And then that's where success will be. So when I took that first time head job at Alfred University in upstate New York, and I was coaching distance runners for the first time in many years, I was very fortunate that people listened, and we had the first ever female to qualify for cross-country nationals. And it was because Liz listened to what I had to offer and say, but she put in the work, and that's the key. Are you going to have kids who are willing to put in the work and then just trust and believe in whatever you have them do, no matter how crazy they may think of it? And that's the key.
Awesome. And we'll switch gears here a little bit. You've got such a wide range of coaching experiences from high school to the world championship level, Olympic level, and everywhere in between. How have you taken what you have learned through your international coaching experience and implemented it into what you do at Carnegie Mellon and some of your other?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that through my years of developing into a coach, I've always been a very progression-oriented, drill-oriented person. I think that's because that's the way I was when I was a thrower myself, or even in baseball, doing drills after drills. It was just who I was. And so it's things, I've developed a progression that has worked well for me here at Carnegie Mellon and other places I've been. But spending like 3 weeks with Art Venegas, he taught me some more drills that I can use. One drill we call the Kovacs Hill drill. And we were in Birmingham, England, and watching them throw. And next thing I know, Jarrell Hill does this drill. He's set up in the back like he's going to do a full throw. And next thing I know is he spins directly towards me, and I'm sitting off of the circle at 9 o'clock. So if the toe board is at 6, the back of the ring is 12. He actually does basically a South African right towards me. And I'm like, Jarrell, what are you doing? And he's like, this is how we work on making sure we stay over the left leg as we come out of the back. And I had never seen it before. And then Joe did it. And I was like, dang. Well, of course, as soon as I got back to Carnegie Mellon, what became part of the drill progression? And I just named it the Kovac Hill drill. And so now if our kids are coming out of the back and they're not working over as a right-handed thrower, that left side, working over that blocking leg coming out of the back, then I automatically look at them and I was like, what are you going to do? And they go, Kovacs Hill drill. I said, yeah. So you can work and feel that left side movement for a right-handed thrower. So it's taking those things and then also just tweaking them to making them so that it works and it understands for the kids that I have, but keeping it within my progressions on what I want to do. And actually I'll share, go back to this here. And you can see here, this is, again, being at Carnegie Mellon, most of my throwers are either computer science, engineers, science majors, and they're a lot smarter in making Google Docs and Excel spreadsheets than I am. And so what you can see here is, the name Bailey O'Malley. He was a freshman this year, local Pittsburgh kid. If he's 5'8", 5'9", I'm 7 foot tall. He weighs about 235, but a week or two, about 3 weeks before our indoor conference meet, he was deadlifting 605 for triples. So he's incredibly strong, great strength out of high school. The big thing we're doing, he was a glider in high school, so we're turning him into a rotational. But you can see the drill, overhead drill, walking drill, up and over to the corner, mirror drill, step back, south arrow. And so you can see, and then one of the things that I really kind of learned from watching a lot of the throwers that John Smith would work with, and Michelle can attest to this because she's been on a number of teams with me, with them, is they would mark their throws in practice and then they would measure them. And so that's where I kind of turned into the idea of move the mark. And in practice, get them to start thinking about just not exactly what the technique is looking, but let them see that as the fall is going on, they're actually getting better. And so it's those little things that I would see people do at that international level that I would take over. Now, after being with Mason Finley for a number of years, I still don't let my discus throwers spin the discus up in the air before he goes and initiates a throw. I don't think my kids are as athletic enough to catch it every single time. So, so there's things that are pretty unique to what they do. But even you'll see, I don't think a lot of us will actually teach kids to actually tuck that discus behind their back like Mason does. But it works for Mason. But if you see where he puts the table up when he hits the center of the circle with his right foot, I talk about putting it up on the table, it's up there. And he gets a great lift, where lots of times I've seen young throwers who tuck it and they keep it right there at their hip. Mason never leaves it tucked. He puts it way up on that shelf and gets a huge pull on it, So there are some things that I watch and I see that I don't use, but then there are a lot that we have been able to bring over. But a key, again, is how does it fit in with your kids? And one of the things that we did, I finally had money to get one of the handheld lasers. And I was able to make it so much easier instead of pulling a tape to mark all these cones out there, how far the kids are throwing. I just had the laser in the center of the circle and boom, 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 boom. And it was so much easier to mark all these different progressions this year as well. So having that technology aided it as well.
Awesome. And to keep on that kind of connection between what you're doing at Carnegie Mellon and some of the elite throwers you've worked with, as you work with all these different athletes of different levels, what characteristics have you noticed successful athletes have that, regardless of level, that help them succeed, whether that's physical, whether that's mental, whether that's their approach? That question's from Bill Richards.
Yeah, I think there's, I think, that whole, first and foremost, I don't care if it's Ryan Krauser or if it's Mark Edwards, Mark Edwards is one of my young throwers. It's how much dedication and desire do they have, but there are major differences, and I can show you real quick. Let's see. Let me see if I can get back to it. Trying to see, I had video pulled up. Here we go. So this here is where we throw indoors at Carnegie Mellon. This is Bram Miller. He was a sophomore last year, and he was a national qualifier in the shot and discus. And you can see he's 6'6", 6'7", 315. And you can see where we actually throw. Everything hits a net, comes down. This is where Derek, now you know where Nicolette is throwing. One of Derek Yush's athletes, she lives here in Pittsburgh, and she'll come and she'll work out with me during Christmas, and so she can get some workouts in. And so this is where she's throwing. But what we can see is, so that was Bram, and now you can see the major difference now in this is Jordan Geist, and watch the speed at which he's going. And so now you can see some of the physical differences, even though Bram is so much bigger than Jordan. But look at the speed at which Jordan's doing things versus the speed at which Bram is doing. And yet Bram, for Al and myself, and Brandon, and for Mark, I mean, he is, he's one of the better throwers in Division III. But look at the speed in which he moves the ball compared to Jordan. It's not even close. And that's why Jordan's one of the best ones in the United States and even in the world. So it's that muscle twitch, that speed. It's also the strength levels. And again, I'm very close with Jordan because Jordan's mom and dad are Slippery Rock grads. I was Jordan's mom's specific coach when she was an All-American for us in the shot put at Slippery Rock. And his dad was a 4-time All-American for us, Jim Geist. And Jim and I, it was like we had Bible study classes, but where we're reading Jairus Tarad's book on javelin throwing. And that's what we would do when I was a graduate assistant. I'd go down to Jim's room and we'd hang out when we just taught, because Jim was a huge technical component as well. And so it's that speed of movement, but it doesn't matter. The key on everything is really trying to find how you can put, no matter what level your athlete is, in the proper positions for them to deliver the ball, the discus, the jab, the hammer, no matter what. Because remember, no matter how big or anything you are, there's 3 things that matter most: height, angle, and speed of release. And how do you put the people in those positions to optimize those 3 aspects? And that's one of the advantages that I have at Carnegie Mellon. My kids can tell me more about Newton's laws than I really need to know because they live them all the time, So, but that's what we're looking to do. So it's those physical capabilities that they have, but can you still get them in the right position? And that's the key. And so when Nicolette or Jordan come and throw with me in the winter, the very first question that I ask them both is, what's Coach Yush doing with you this year? What's TJ doing with you this year? And Jordan, his first throw, I went, you're doing something different with your hip action than what you did a year ago. What's going on? And he described it to me. Or I'll say something to Nicolette and she'll relate, because for me, I don't want to say anything bad because I want to compliment what Derek and what TJ are doing for Jordan and Nicolette. And I'm just trying to be their eyes so they can't be with them. So if I can be their eyes and give them little cues that I know from knowing TJ and Derek, then that's a great thing, and giving them. But there's a sense, kids are home for vacation. They're working out every single day. And that's the key. You got to have kids who want to do that type of thing. And that's why even now, when our kids, and I'm sure a lot of you, especially in the throws, it's really easy. The kids are home. And as Len Huang, the one kid, he goes, Coach, they closed the track, and I have a hurdler from and so Anthony can't go and hurdle. But Len goes, they don't care about the throws. That's not closed. And so I told Anthony to go shag Len's discus, and he can do the intervals. And I was like, Len, just make sure you can throw a high school one every once in a while to make it go even further, to make Anthony go chase it. So that's the key. I'm sure they're still finding ways to throw now. Graham Miller, he's a mechanical engineer. He built a shot put circle that had an insert that he could pull out and make it into a discus circle. I posted it on Facebook and Twitter a week or two back so that everybody could see it. And it was just him being a mechanical engineer, knowing that he wanted to do work and he can just put it in the driveway. I just had to convince his mom it was okay that the grass would grow back when the shot put landed in the front yard, though. So
grass always grows back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Coach. A couple of years ago, you got the opportunity to go down to Brazil and work with the Brazilian Athletics Federation, actually coaching coaches. How was the experience of coaching coaches, and how do you approach something like that, and how was that experience overall?
Yeah, that was and again that really happened because of Rob Lasorsa. So Rob Lasorsa was a big reason for me to be able to go down there, but that was an incredible opportunity. Talk about a situation where, I've always given, different clinics and stuff, and I'd have things set up where we as coaches, when you do a clinic, you get like an hour block and you base your discussion on that hour. And Michelle and Derek will understand this really well because of them doing the academy stuff for the United States Track and Field Cross Country as Coaches Association. All of a sudden now I had to do 4 hours of teaching in the classroom and then 4 hours of teaching out on the track for 5 days. So that was a challenge. It was a challenge to have. I don't speak Portuguese, even though I grew up back home in Somerset, Massachusetts, southeast of Mass, huge Portuguese community. I wish I listened to Manny Cavallo a lot more. He was a friend of mine he spoke English to us, but when he was home, he spoke Portuguese. So I should have listened to Manny talk to his mom and dad more. But it was great because I got a chance to work with some of the Brazilian athletes as well. And even though there was a language barrier, the thing that was the best learning thing for me out of that was that we don't have to speak a spoken word. So many of us, we speak with our body language. So even if I didn't, and my interpreter, he was a business major at Georgetown. He knew nothing about physical education, athletic, track, anything. Where Dwight Phillips, he had a girl who went to school here in the States and was a long and triple jump, and her mom and dad were some of the best coaches in the jumps in Brazil. I was like, Dwight, you have a lot easier interpreter, situation here. There was no language barrier, just in the actual things I was trying to get across. And then you add my New England accent, it really kind of threw people off a lot. But the body movement, so I could demonstrate, and even though the kid interpreting for me couldn't interpret it, the athletes understood it. So it really reinforced that me going back, and even at the age of 60 now, I still need to be able to demonstrate and show what I'm trying to get kids to do. And I believe that even when I was working with the jumpers, being able to do takeoff drills and show them some body positions. And luckily, being large, maybe I can't now maybe show a jumper how to get into a takeoff position, but I can put them in that position and I can hold them up in the air so that they are in that position. So I think one of the biggest things out of the Brazilian thing was meeting the Brazilian people and watching for their love to be able to come and listen, and then the kids love, and how much I put a post out. They're using bamboo javelins for training devices because they don't have money. There's a specific guy in Brazil who will grip bamboo sticks and put points on them. And that's what these guys are using for javelin for practice. And it's so cool to see things like that. But then learning about how important it is that I continue to demonstrate and be in a physical manner, not just in a verbal manner. And that's huge. It really is.
Awesome. I've got 2 more general questions for you, and then I want to get into some of these technical training questions that people have been asking. One, do you have a particular favorite throwing event to coach? And if so, what's the reason?
Not really. I like them all. I mean, there's certain things I love teaching kids who have never picked up a hammer before. I love seeing that progression occur. I love being there. But then I also really enjoy, like I have a young man who played football, and he didn't do track his senior year in high school because his high school didn't have anybody who could teach him how to throw the javelin. But now I've seen what Leland's love for throwing the javelin is, because he's actually being shown some things, and he's working so hard to do the things, and he's never been taught progressions or technical aspects, and he's just being a sponge. So it doesn't matter, but I probably have, just mainly my best throw was the discus in college, so that's always there. But I threw the shot put longer than I did, so it's all of them. I don't really have a favorite, so it's just phases that we go through, and it's really dealing with the kids.
Awesome. And then final question from our original list. I know you've been getting this one a lot, but I think people would be interested to hear is, how is the delaying of the Olympics, going to affect some of these elite athletes?
Yeah, it's going to be curious. There's a couple of thought patterns. One, which athletes are going to be able to deal with now all of a sudden, because they've been in a 4-year training program to get ready to make the team and then also to perform at the Olympics. So how are they going to adjust that 4-year program and readjust it to this 1 year? I think some of the bigger questions are, how are our elite athletes going to deal with, and maybe not the very elite, but some of the upcoming people, because so many of them go to Europe for meets to make appearance fees and make money. And so how is that going to change? We're still in a I don't know situation. What's going to happen this fall? We saw a release just today or yesterday in Forbes magazine about Harvard is going to have classes. They just don't know if they're going to be in person, somewhat in person, or virtual. If they're virtual, probably not going to have athletics. So how is that going to change? I think for us in the throws community, I think the thing that is really important to know is that we have some amazing athletes and amazing coaches who, I don't care what the adversity is, they're going to find a way to get themselves ready and perform. I'm sure a number of people probably saw the video of Joe Kovacs squatting with Ashley, spotting him. And as Rob and I talked about, what was Ashley going to do if Joe couldn't get 700 pounds up? I don't know if Ashley was going to be able to help lift them up there, but here they are. They're in the middle of still training and redoing things. So I think a lot is going to be the mental aspect. I think the thing that's going to be interesting, though, is maybe some of those younger throwers who maybe were a year away, maybe this puts them into a mix, so maybe some things, it's a good thing for someone like a Sean Donnelly in the Hammer. It gives him another year of growth and development, to continue on, to go up against a Connor McCullough. Or does Kipway Johnson come back into throwing again? Does this go, hey, I got another year to prepare? So does it entice him to come back for one more year to make another Olympic team? So I think it's going to be very interesting. But I think the athletes, the coaches that we have in our events, I think they're incredibly strong people, and they're going to find a way to be ready and perform at the trials and then at the Olympics in the best way that they can, representing themselves and the United States. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to go into a few of these technique and kind of event-specific questions that people have been asking. Joel on YouTube asked, as a beginning throwers coach, where would I get the best resources for me to learn the rotational events and then be able to coach it?
I think one of the best ways is to reach out. I truly enjoy what our USTFCCCA Coaches Association is doing with their academies and the classes. And Derek and Michelle are big speakers for that, so they would be able to speak out even more. Back when I was a young throwing coach, there was no USTFCCCA. And so I was part of the USA Track and Field Coaches Education Program. I did the level 1, did the level 2, did the level 2 for not only throws, but also for the jumps. So I think those are two ways that you can definitely go about and start your initial growth as a coach. Again, I don't know a coach who, if you were to email them and just ask them some questions about rotation, that they're going to turn away from answering it for you. They'll answer. Maybe during the season it might be a little bit delayed, but they're going to find a way to answer, because we all were young throws coaches at one times, and I can remember, Kevin McGill, who was a big name in coaching education, and Kevin was out of Massachusetts. I would ask Kevin things. Joe Donahue at Northeastern, which I'm sure Al had numerous conversations with Joe, and was Sandy Fowler's throwing coach when she was in college at Northeastern. Was a tremendous person for me to bounce and learn some things off as well, because Joe, in that initial beginning, he was actually doing things with rotational. And Rob, if I'm correct, Sandy was a glider and Joe turned her into a rotational thrower in the shot put. So don't be afraid to reach out to people. And to kind of go into that question, one of the big questions everybody will ask, like, especially for me in recruiting, is, I'm a glider. Will you switch me to a rotational thrower? I don't know. I got to watch you throw. I got to see how you work, what your movement ability is. And so that question doesn't happen right away. Bailey O'Malley, the kid that I showed on the Excel spreadsheet, I knew when he came in because he was a local kid. So I had seen him throw a number of times, because my daughter just graduated from high school a year ago as well, and she's a freshman up at Slippery Rock. She's a distance runner. How that happened, I have no idea. And, so Bailey I had seen throw numerous times. I knew I wanted to convert him to a rotational thrower, but I had been able to see him. Whereas some other people like Graham Miller, we haven't switched, although we're starting to play with the idea of throwing. And during this time at home, he's been playing with doing some rotational stuff in the shot put, so it's getting a feel for what your kids do. Do they have the physical aptitude as well as the mental aptitude as well?
Awesome. Let's see. Another one from the YouTube is Bob's asking how you approach your weightlifting programs for the year. What are some important things for you?
Yeah. Number one, I'm very big into Olympic lifts. That is really the first and foremost thing that our kids will do. The other night, I guess it's a week and a half or so ago, Mike Gaetano from USA Weightlifting did a webinar on with Dan McQuaid on his webinar podcast, which was a great thing. Listening to him talk about Olympic lifts for not only throws but all track and field athletes. And then again, it goes to what I have here at Carnegie Mellon. Because of our academic structure and because of the weight room situation, we do things a lot differently. I do a lot of multi-movement exercises. If we're doing some type of shoulder workout, I'll do like I, Y, and T rows. So we put them all together instead of doing one specific row and doing it multiple times. I try to group things because the amount of times that our kids have in the weight room as well as out on the track for technical work is very much different than what I really believe, people at Division I may have. Because of the time that Alen Hwang is putting in trying to be a computer science major. I have to be cognizant of that. And so I do a lot of grouping of things. I've become a lot better as the years have come on and shortening our bouts in the weight room and focusing on more of the major aspects of things. And it's also been very helpful for me that when Nicolette or Jordan come home, I get to see what Derek is doing with them in the weight room, or I get to see what TJ, although I need magnifying glasses with TJ because he puts everything in 8-point, and I can't read it because my eyes are not that strong anymore, even with my glasses. So Derek, you'll have to ask Nicolette about that joke that we have every winter about TJ's list. I say he does it because he doesn't want anybody to know what it is. So I've become very good at shortening the bouts in there and focusing on the major things. We definitely build things around our schedule, and we keep it in a phase format where the phases are basically 4 weeks long. I believe in testing. We do the Max Jones quadrathlon test every single fall. We'll test 3 times in the weight room, fall, winter, and then at the end after the conference meets are over for actual maxes. And we're doing front squat, back squat, clean, snatch, incline, and flat bench. So those 6 movements we test. Because I build my stuff on percentages. Mike Sargent was a big aid in me and what he was doing with his kids, and also it's developed. There's some things that, Jordan's mom, Judy Geis would be able to still recognize from things I was doing back in the 90s. But then there's other things she would never have recognized because it's grown and developed. I don't think there's been one year where my weightlifting workouts have stayed the same. They constantly evolve. And I think that's one of the things that they have to do is they have to constantly evolve so that you can make it better. But it also stops the kids from being bored and stale with doing the same thing over and over again. And then again, it's getting them to buy in. And I think I've been very fortunate that we have a 4-day lift workout before our conference meet. And our people think it is the best thing in the world, and it will set them up to throw the furthest they'll ever throw at the UAA championships. And they bought into it. And I think it's physiologically sound, but the key is they like it and they buy into it. And that's what makes it so good for us. So
Awesome. Another question we got from OC was, what advice would you give a high school athlete trying to transition to throw some of the college implements?
yeah, I think a great way to start that, especially, in high school, is are you strong enough to handle the collegiate implements even when you're a senior in high school? Do you have enough strength to handle it? But I think a great way that I used to do, especially when I was coaching high school, is, and I even do that now, as athlete, like for instance, Bram Miller, he does all his standing work in the shot put with an 18-pound shot put. And then when we go into movement patterns, he goes back down to the 16. So I think a great way to start it is in those standing power position places, you can use those heavier implements. The key is also, don't think that you have to get really heavy. If you talk to Art Venegas doesn't believe a lot into doing a lot of multi-weight heavy implement stuff until there's major strength gains involved. Where someone like Jerry Clayton up at Michigan, he's doing a lot of multi-weights, especially in the hammer and the weight throw. He's got all kinds of heavy weights that he's doing. So the key is, how much can you handle? But start in power positions, because you can stop pushing the ball or moving things that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. One of my graduating athletes actually is just tuned into the YouTube and is asking, when working with an athlete that used the glide technique in high school, how do you decide whether or not to turn them into a glider or rotator? And that's from Mike.
Yeah, it kind of, I hit on that a little bit ago. It's really a feeling. It's watching what they're like mentally. If you have a person who, he has one bad throw and it's like the world is coming to an end, and they get mad and they start cursing and, throwing things, they may not be the greatest person to teach how to rotate, because one of the things about differences between gliding and rotating is, if you were to plot your throws as a glider, they tend to all plot together and then they get a spike and then they kind of gradually move up and gather again, and then they'll go higher. There's not a lot of deviation within that grouping, where a rotational, you can have a throw over here, over here, over here, and they're all over the place. And so if it's a person who, if they're throwing 50 feet and they throw 40 feet, is that they're devastated and they can't ever handle it, then that may not be the best person to teach how to rotate. And staying with a glide, and until they learn how to control that emotion, that may be the way to go. So that's the actual mental aspect of it. But then it's the physical. Are they able to move? It's not about, how big they are. It used to be, when I was young, it was, rotational was only for that small thrower, because the ring was so small. But people like Randy Bonds, he blew that. Ryan Krause was blowing that out of the water. The kid from Brazil, he's no small person either. So we're seeing that rotational shot putting is not just for smaller, compact people like it initially was thought of back in the early 80s. And so it's the physical and it's the mental aspect, and it's knowing whether your kids can handle it. And so that's why I knew right away with Bailey that I was going to switch him. But Graham, it's taken us 2 years to get to the point where we're starting to feel comfortable with him moving to a rotational. But we're still even feeling it out because I don't have any time with him in the fall, because there's a good chance he's going to be a preseason All-American this year for football. He's our starting left tackle. I think he's given up 1 sack his entire college career. So I haven't had any time with him. So, of course, Graham's thing about this is Graham's going to be back for a 5th year, and because he's going to get his master's. And he said, hey, Coach, this is great. I get another year with you, and I don't have to play football. And I said, that's even better, So, yeah. So I think it's a combination of those things, Brandon.
You mentioned some of your students playing multiple sports. Ronnie on YouTube's asking, how do you combat overuse injuries with multi-sport athletes?
Yeah, I think you've got to be smart. I'm very fortunate here at Carnegie Mellon that my football coaches, be it the head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, when their kids want to do track, they do track. They do my lifting. They don't have to go to their lifting. They don't have to go to the 7 a.m. workouts. They don't have to go to spring ball, anything like that. They're with me. On the same side of things, they also know that I'm not doing anything with them on the track aspect of things as well, But so it's being able to talk. But after football is over, the first thing I do is I have major sit-down meetings with every single one of the football kids, or I have a girl on the basketball team. I have a major sit-down with them to really get an idea where they are at physically, where they are mentally, and try to start developing a plan for them to transition into track and field. And if they need time to recover, then we give them that time, And so it's having those discussions with your athletes that will help guide you on what to do. The good thing is say you're coming out of basketball, there's a lot of plyometric activities there. So maybe that's an aspect of your training that you don't have to really concentrate on. You know what I mean? So, for me, the big aspect is getting the guys in a transformational weightlifting program, because so much of what they've done, especially the last month in football, has just been all maintenance type things. There's been no strength gain. So can I put them right into the same phase that I'm having all the kids who are doing the fall track program? No way, because they will break down. So I have a whole transitional weight workout that I do for kids, be it coming. I've had soccer players, football, volleyball, basketball. So I've got to have separate programs to bring them in and get them up to speed, if you will, to what we're doing in our program. So
awesome. We are eclipsing the hour mark, Coach. We have a couple more questions. Are you okay?
No problem.
Awesome. Another one that we had here, Tyler had submitted a question to us before, and he's asking what specific strength exercises have the most correlation for each event in your experience?
Yeah. So again, I truly believe in the Olympic lift, or variation in the Olympic lift, or the clean and snatches. I truly believe in them. With javelin aspect of things, I like to do things where I'm doing pullover type activities to work on that stretch and get that flexibility in the shoulder girdle. Numerous years ago, 20-some years ago, Tom Puskis showed me just sit in a incline bench and take a real light dumbbell and just do dumbbell circles, forward and backwards, and really work on that flexibility and getting that full range of motion. So that's what I like to see in javelin, things that are going to aid in that flexibility of the shoulder girdle. Because a lot of, especially like my guys coming into javelin through football, they tend to be pretty bulky and they need that flexibility work so they can invert the armpit when they throw the javelin. In the shot and discus, again, the Olympic lifts are the key things because I'm looking at getting those triple joint extensions, the extension of the ankle, knee, and the hip. And the Olympic lifts are the two major variations of where you get that ankle, knee, and hip extension. So I'm doing things there. But again, you've got to kind of also look at the athlete. Len Huang, for instance, did really well, but one of the things we saw when he got to Carnegie Mellon was he was weak. He wasn't very strong. And with using the bigger implements. So that is one of the things we worked on in the fall. And I can really remember, like he was deadlifting and he was like, well, and he wasn't deadlifting a lot. And I was like, Len, we got to put some weight on there. And he looked at me and I was like, let's put it on box. And so we did deadlifts off the box. So he's not pulling from the ground. And so he was able to do more weight from that box position than he would have been able to do from the ground. And so it was a way to kind of bridge the gap between getting him some more strength. And so he's pulling more. And then as he got to handle the weight, we pulled the boxes out and dropped him closer and closer to the floor. And we saw the strength gains come. I like to do things that mirror, and again, because of Carnegie Mellon, I like to do things that mirror what we're going to do out on the track. So like in discus with flies, I like to do straight arm flies rather than doing regular flies. I like to do straight arm flies. Again, I'm not as concerned with how much weight you're doing in the flies, but getting that range of motion, letting them feel that the dumbbell is like a discus and you're holding it at that shoulder level. So those are the types of things that we like to do. Hammer, especially, lots of core work and trying to work the hammer, so those are kind of some of the things that we do, event specific type things, but they all kind of work for every single one of them, really.
Awesome. And I've got two more questions here.
Sure.
G-Man submitted a question ahead of time. What are drills that are good for improving explosion in the power position? If there's anything we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, so we do a drill that we call walking drill. And it's basically you just start in the back of the circle, outside the circle, and you take a couple of steps and you walk into a power position and get that wrap position, and then you drive out of it. And whenever and again, it was something that Jarrell and Joe was doing, and I picked up, and I had never done that before, and I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And it was great because you could see how the kids never really wrapped when they got into a power position. But when they did start to wrap, they would pause and hesitate for like a second or two. Whereas if you watch Darrell or Joe do the drill, they would wrap and explode right out of it. And so I was like, okay, now we're wrapping, but let's move. Let's quit taking a lunch break in there. And so again, it aided, especially for my gliders, in that concept of hitting and stopping in the power position and then moving instead of hitting and reacting right away. So the walking drill is something that over the last couple of years I've really been able to see as aided in developing that explosive movement pattern. The other thing too is just in the standing throws, I like to do a lot of non-reverse type things because again, young throwers, they will reverse so fast that if you actually plotted it and saw where they released the shot is probably releasing before they even get to the toe board. So the toe board is here and they're releasing here instead of reaching out way over the toe board and releasing because they're so far back. And so having that non-reverse, we keep that blocking foot down on the ground and we drive the hips into it. And again, if you go back to the video that I had of Jordan, you can really see him, even though this is a full throw, you can see him driving that right hip into the throw, you know, and you can see how he's really lining it up and driving out. And you can see that drive and that explosion. So that's one of those non-reverse, and that walking drill has been really good for us at Carnegie Mellon to work on that explosive action.
Awesome. And then I believe the last one that I have on my list is from Dr. Zachary Hood. If you had to pick 3 must-do drills for kids just starting to throw, what would they be?
Well, if we go to the very beginning part where they're never thrown before, I think they have to do some type of release drill so that they learn. And I'm assuming we're talking shot put here.
He didn't specify, so you can pick your event.
If we're thinking shot put, I want to do some type of release drill so they can work on keeping the elbow back behind the shot and not letting the elbow rotate in front, so that they can stay behind and push. And I always use the analogy, when you guys bench press, where are your elbows in relationship to the bar? They're behind the bar and you're pushing it. Well, in shot put, you'll watch younger kids, especially when they're going into rotational, they'll rotate and that elbow will lead up in front, and then they got to drop the elbow and then throw the shot. And their thumb comes up. So I want to have that shot put back, and I want to drive the ball down. So Rob LaSorsa, many, many years ago, with him, myself, Bruce Van Horn, were traveling around the country doing clinics. Rob came up with a progression where we would be doing kneeling release drills just throwing straight down into the grass where you're getting that pushing action. And one of the best analogies I ever heard was, you can see the back of your palm, watch it disappear, you know, and the thumb is still down to the ground, you know, so it's like that throwing, you know, the dot or the football type of action. So I think that's one thing for young throwers, how to actually get a proper release. I'm very big in, again, when I was in high school, lots of times my young kids, they go to meets and they're like, why am I not throwing glide or rotating yet? And I was like, because you still can't throw out of power position. I want to make sure that they understand and they have that movement pattern first. So I want them to do a power position type thing. And then probably the third one would be some type of transitional work, be step back or a glide, hesitate, so that you can take inventory if you are hitting in a good power position, being wrapped, and then throw. Discus, same type of thing, bowling, because again, when you bowl as the disc, you learn really fast. Wherever you point your thumb, the discus will go. It will also allow you to realize that pendulum action of what the arm should be doing. Again, doing standing work in the discus, and I like the wheel, or as Rob termed it, mirror drill. I like that as well for discus action. Hammer, winds and turns, foot movement, whatever you can do there. Javelin type things. I like to work throwing balls, putting them in inverted positions and then coming out of it. So they invert the armpit and then pull. And I like doing, again, Tom Putzkis, a long time ago, taught me this. We call it the towel drill, where you'll stand like it's perfect. Like for us, to go from our walkway underneath the stadium, we can use a towel and we can snap and hit the towel directly over our head and we'll be fully extended. If you don't have that doorway type situation, like at Slippery Rock, we didn't have that situation. So Tom put a kid in the stands with a stick hanging out over, and then he would have the person with a towel set up like he's going to do a standing throw, and then he would drive his heel over, drive the knee, drive the hip, and then he would invert and he would smack, and he'd get that real tall position where he's getting bicep to ear position. So those drills were really good, and I still always go back to one of the things that Tom Puskas told me at Slippery Rock when he was there for a camp, which was pretty incredible camp. Had Puskas, Brian Oldfield, John Kennison, and Randy Heisler were at Slippery Rock for this camp. And Tom said he just took the javelin throws, and I'm like, where are you going? He's like, there's a pond. And he's like, we're going down to the pond. I was like, what are you going to do to the pond? We're going to throw rocks. And he's like, we're just going to have kids throw. Try to get them to use proper throwing mechanics. And so he took them down, had a whole big bucket of rocks, and he just threw rocks into the pond. So things like that, I think those are some of those basic movement patterns for the various events, which I think would be really good to start your novice kids out with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Coach. It has been awesome hearing your insights and answering a lot of these questions. I can't thank you enough for getting us kicked off with this series on the right foot. One thing I will say, MF was randomly giving a $50 gift card to one of our people who submitted questions, and the winner of that is Dr. Zachary Hood. So you can send a email to Rob LaSorsa or myself. I can put my email at the end, and we'll get that sent out to you. Again, really big thanks to Coach Aldrich today. This has been awesome, and if you have anybody that you would like to share this with that you think would help or would enjoy this will be available to replay on this channel. And we'll be coming out with some of this stuff weekly for the next couple of weeks. And thank you very much. And we will
Brandon, if I can say a big thank you for reaching out to me. This is a tremendous thing. I heard a cross-country panel discussion that Matt Barreau from Lewis and Clark did with Jeff Stiles and Bobby Van Allen from Johns Hopkins, Jeff from Washington University of St. Louis, and some other coaches. And as I'm watching that, I'm going, this would be pretty cool if we did something similar in the throws. And then not much later, you reached out to me. So this is a tremendous thing, and I can't wait to hear the other people, because like I said, so many of the people that are here, I am incredible huge fans of, and just think the world of on what they do with, everything that they do in the throws, but also in track and field. And, there's so much experience that we have here. And I can't thank you enough. And then obviously Rob and I go way back to our 1 o'clock in the morning calls when he was coaching at Kent State and I was at Slippery Rock. This is the only time we could actually know we would be able to talk. This was before there was any emails or computers. And, Rob and I go way back. But the things that Rob has done for the throwing community, it's incredible. And I'm talking from the grassroots level to the elite. You can't believe what the elite throwers say and what they think about what Rob LaSorsa does for them. And it's an incredible thing. And be it with MF Athletic Company or the National Throws Coaches Association, it's we're very fortunate to have someone like Rob doing the things that he does for our real special sport and also events. So thank you to you guys as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. I am going to end the live stream, but I will just say, if you are watching out there, please subscribe to our channel and keep tuning in the next couple of weeks as we push out some more great presenters for you guys. Awesome, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Brandon.